This video is going to do a review of masking and also show you a few tips and tricks to make masking more efficient and a little bit more believable in those hard to reach areas. Once you're on Blackboard, click on the demo files link and then click on the masking link to download the masking zip file. Once that downloads, go ahead and unzip it by double clicking on it. And you can throw away the zip file because we won't need it, and then you can go inside of the demo folder. Some of these files are going to look familiar for those of you who have taken digital imaging because it is going to use the same files to help reinstate some of the techniques and concepts that you already learned. So what we are going to start off doing is I'm going to just go ahead and open all of them inside of Photoshop. You can use whichever method you want in order to open them. Okay, so some of these are going to look familiar, like the watering can, the hallway, the doctor, the building, and then some of these other ones are newer. So the whole point in really paying attention to masking, and one of the very first things that we're going to do is changing the color of this watering can in a minute. But what I want to point out to you is that selective coloring happens a lot in advertising. Swiffer is a company that uses it all the time. So this particular product is green, and then look at all of the materials in the background. So like there's a lamp, there's a vase, there is a picture in a frame, the curtains, even the couch kind of has that tint to it. So, and then the overall color scheme kind of plays along with that green. The female in the scene is wearing a green shirt. So all of that is really trying to subliminally place that green in there, which color theory that should hopefully make you think of like environmentally friendly and just overall clean, and that's all helping to kind of reinstate that in your brain and help you kind of think of the color green and associate it with this product. Here's another example of it, and I'm going to make this a little bit larger, this time in a magazine ad. So although this green isn't as obvious, you can still see it in little pieces throughout the background of the scene. And again, this is something that they do really well. And then using the green in the design at the bottom where the text is, and really just kind of doing a good job at reinstating that green. So a lot of this, I mean, they didn't have to go and find all the materials that were green, and I mean they've got a budget, so maybe they did, but what about if you don't? You know, if you're just kind of starting off, you should still use these same techniques, and that's where masking really comes in. So we are going to start with this watering can image, and we are going to make a selection of this watering can just to change the color of it. So I am going to go up to my quick selection tool, and I am going to make a selection of it. Okay, and I'm using the left and the right bracket keys to make my brush larger and smaller. I'm going to hold down Option to subtract from the selection. Sometimes you have to go back and forth with it. It can be a little bit picky with the colors that it's picking up. All right, something like that looks good. So if you're not done selecting it, you might want to pause the video at this moment because I'm going to go ahead and move on. All right, so once you have the selection done, what you're going to do is come up to your options bar and choose Select and Mask. Under the view mode, I have mine set to on black, and I'm going to turn up the opacity. So this is really going to do a good job at showing me what all I've selected. So we can see the edges of that aren't that clean. I'm going to check Smart Radius, bring the radius slider up just a tiny bit. We don't need too much because it starts to clip off some of the pieces. I will do Shift Edge and bring that to the left a little bit. So what that's going to do is take the actual selection and make it a little bit smaller. So it's almost like transforming the selection. All right, maybe bump up the contrast so you can see the change in light values. Okay, and then whenever you're done, just hit OK. All right, so there's my selection, and you don't have to start with the selection, but in this case, it makes it much easier. Then down at the bottom of your layers panel in the center, there's the adjustment layer icon, which is the circle that's half filled in. Click on that, and we are going to go to hue saturation. Click on the colorize checkbox, so that way you get the light values to change color the same as the shadows and the highlights, or the shadows and the midtones. I'm going to bring up the saturation a little bit just so it's easier to see this change in color, and then go ahead and choose a different color for this can to be. Adjust the saturation slider to make the color more believable in this environment. And you can change the lightness slider as well, but don't do it too much or you'll see that it is going to make it look just a little bit too fake. Okay, so that right there looks pretty good. This layer, I would call it like purple watering can because that's the color that I made it. You can make yours a different shade. A few things about the mask. Okay, so this part right here is the mask in the layers panel. If you hold down shift and you click on the mask, it's going to put a red X over it on the layers panel. And what that's going to do is it's going to show you what this hue saturation layer looks like without a mask. So you can see it applied to the entire document. Shift click it again to make it show the actual mask. Now one thing that might be helpful is to see where the white and black actually is painted on this mask. So if you hold down Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC and click, you'll be able to see that. So where this is really helpful is I can see some of my edges aren't very clean right here. So I can take my brush tool and put white in the foreground, and I am going to get a different brush. Okay, so I'm going to do hard round, and I'm just going to paint and fill this in. For the sake of the demo and time, I wouldn't go in and do the whole thing, but if this were an assignment or something you were giving to a client or for your job, I would definitely go in and clean this up because some of these aren't very nice and smooth, and you would want to go in and clean that up, especially right in here. All right, I probably got a little bit too much, so I'm going to hit this bent arrow, or I could hit the X key and just clean that up. That's one of the great things about masks is that nothing is permanent and you can always come in with white or black and you can clean it or fix it. All right, so I would just continue doing all of that. And to get out of the mode to see the mask in black and white, just hold down Option or Alt again and click, and then you'll see that we kind of cleaned it up some. Since I'm still in the paintbrush and I have white in the foreground, let me adjust my settings up here at the top, make sure they're all 100%, just so you can see them easier. If I click and drag and I paint with white, and you can see the change in the thumbnail in my mask, what I'm doing is I'm saying anywhere that I paint with white, hey, show this layer, show this hue saturation layer. Anywhere that I paint with black, I'm saying hide this hue saturation layer. Okay, so that's really how you have to think about masking. You want to show and hide layers based on what it is you need to see. So white is going to show that layer, black is going to hide that layer. All right, next, let's move to the building JPEG. The building JPEG. Okay, so with this one, we had talked about back in digital imaging, for those of you who had it, that we liked the value of the sky, the exposure of the sky, but the building was too dark. Now, trying to go into all the little pieces in the trees and mask that out could be a real pain. So what we could do is just use a gradient. So the first thing that I'm going to do is come down to my adjustment layer icon and choose levels. Now, I'm not going to pay attention to how the sky looks, but what I want to do is bring up the highlights, and I'm only paying attention to the bottom. All right, so we can see if I hide this layer, it is brightening the whole document, but I'm more concerned about that bottom part. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take my gradient tool. I'm going to click on the drop down arrow for the gradient, and I'm just going to choose the first option. make sure linear is checked. And the way gradients work is whatever color is in the foreground is what it's going to apply whenever you first click, and then whenever you let go, it has going to have been changed to the bottom color. So it's a gradual change between the two colors. So I want to not show the levels layer up here. I only want it to be shown down here. So hopefully in your mind you're thinking, well, I need the top part to be black and I need the bottom part to be white in the gradient. So I'm going to click up here, hold down Shift, click and drag down, and you can see in your mask that you have created a gradient that goes from black to white. Now the nice thing about this is that you can redraw it. Like if I draw it sideways, I'll draw it real small there so that way you can see the change. You can redraw this as many times as you need, but if you draw a longer line, it will be a more gradual change. Now I can come in with my brush with black in the foreground and I can paint, and just to show you, like I would be making that building darker. All right, so you can see like it is still affecting the whole document, but masking is what's telling it where it can be shown. All right, so I am going to paint with white and get rid of that. Okay, and then I am going to paint up here and clean that as well. And when I do that, I can see, well, you know, this is probably the building too, so I'm going to paint, and I'm holding down Shift to draw in straight lines. So I'm probably going to want all of this to be white also, because this is all of the building. So again, that was Option or Alt that I used to click on that. All right, so pretty quickly I was able to make this adjustment. Something else you can do to select a certain area that has all of the same color or similar color is called color range. So first thing that I want you to do is hide the levels layer, just to show you that you can do this. Hide the levels layer, and then click on the background layer, go up to your menu bar and choose Select Color Range. Now depending on if you've used this before or what you've chosen last, you might have something different selected here. By default, it typically selects the white areas, but with the eyedropper tool, just click in the blue somewhere. And you're going to see that it is trying to select all of the blue that is close to the same value as the blue that you clicked on. If you hold down Shift and you click in other areas, you'll see when you hold down Shift, you get the plus sign by your eyedropper. That is going to allow you to add to that. All right, so I'm just going to click in a few different parts in the sky. You can even click in the little diagram down here, but that's not as accurate, at least visually, as clicking on the blue. The fuzziness I'm going to bring down. It doesn't need to be that high, maybe somewhere between 40 and 50, and then hit OK. And then look at that. That did a pretty good job at selecting some of the blue. Let's see what it actually did. So I'm going to go down to my adjustment layer icon, and I'm going to choose Hue Saturation, and just kind of quickly I am going to change the color. So it did pretty good even in like the trees. There's some areas in the clouds, maybe I could adjust that with if I had gone to select and mask first, but I wanted to show you how you can use color range to quickly select one grouping of color. So it really does need to be mostly continuous like what this sky was. All right, I am going to go ahead and close the building. That's all that I wanted to show you with that. Again, you should get into the habit of changing your changing the name of your adjustment layer. So like this one, I would name it like, you know, Pink Sky, and this one I would name it Lighten Building or something along those lines. All right, so I'm going to close it. To save that, I do not need the watering can open anymore. What I'm going to do is take a look at the doctor and the hallway. So whenever we first did this, we had made a selection of the doctor at the end, and we put her in that hallway. So we are going to do that now as well. I'm going to take my quick selection tool, and I am going to make a selection of her. Okay, got a little bit of his jacket there. All right, so once you have the selection made, and if you do not have the selection made at this point, just pause the video. Once you have the selection made, go up to Select and Mask, and I've got to clean that up a little bit. And even if we don't get it right at this point, we can always go in and clean up our mask with the paintbrush, so that's one of the things that makes it really nice. All right, that looks pretty good. One thing you can actually do is from right here, you can do output 2 and you can choose layer mask. So you could do that. In this case, I'm just going to hit OK. And I'm doing this because I want you guys to see where the layer mask icon is in case you forgot. So at the bottom of your layers panel, the add layer mask icon is the icon that is a rectangle with a circle inside of it. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to name this Doctor. And then I'm going to take my move tool and I'm going to move her into the hallway image. Right, she's a little bit large, so I am going to make her smaller. So Command or Control T to transform, and then Command or Control 0 to zoom out to see the entire bounding box. Okay, size her down. Something like that would be good. All right, so I could go in with my mask and kind of clean up some of the edges, but I think at this point what I want to just kind of remind you is that you wouldn't be done in this case. So we had talked about how she has a warm color tone, the hallway has a cool color tone, so we would need to kind of match that. Now the nice thing is that since I've already made the mask, I don't need to make another selection of her. So I would, if I were doing this for an assignment, I would clean up this mask, and then I would make a selection of the mask by holding down Command or Control and clicking on the thumbnail. Okay, so now she has a selection. So again, I held down Command or Control if you're on a PC and clicked on the thumbnail. And then I come down to my adjustment layer icon, and this time I'm going to choose Photo Filter. All right, the filter I used for this one was green. Okay, don't do the density too high, or she's look like she played in toxic waste there. So I'm going to clean that up some. You can see like how that already made a difference. Some other things I would do is probably make a selection of just her jacket, and I would lower the exposure on it because it is kind of bright, as well as doing a few other things. But in this case, it was more, I just wanted to show you or remind you how to do the layer mask. All right, so we can close those. Okay, so hopefully how to do masking is kind of coming back to you. What I really want to get into is taking that to the next step. So I have this image of this ape here, and I'm going to hold down Shift so you can see what the original image looked like. All right, so the masking on here isn't too bad, right? Like it's clipped out. We can just see the monkey. But the problem here is that it literally looks like someone just handed me a photo from a magazine and I took a pair of scissors or an X-Acto knife and I cut it out, right? It doesn't look as believable because if we go back and look at the original, like look, you can see how there's some of his hair that's kind of sticking up. Right? So we need to see that as well. We need to care about that detail. So hopefully you kind of remember some of the things we talked about with brushes and what we've learned about with masking, and we're going to go in and try to add some of that hair back in. Now it doesn't have to be exactly where it was in the original image because no one's going to know that, but we at least have to make it look nice. All right, so I'm going to select my brush tool and I am going to scroll down to where it looks like I have a lot of brushes. Where it looks like it's called dune grass, this one right here. So if you don't have this, what you'll have to go to is your brushes tab, and then you're going to have to click on the menu, and you're going to have to choose. You're going to have to choose legacy brushes. There it is, legacy brushes. You'll have to choose that and add them in if you don't see the dune grass brush. All right, so I'm going to do this one because even though it's called grass, this one could look like a blade of hair. So I am going to go in and do some adjustments first. So let's see, go to size jitter, and I do want this to change. Now I know whenever we did this in digital imaging, I was taking it all the way to the right, but that's just because I was trying to show you the difference in everything. You don't always have to make it so dramatic of a change. Angle jitter, I'll adjust that just a little bit because it's not going to be perfectly groomed hair all the time. I will scatter it just a little bit, and I'll just scatter on both axes. And so the count that you have is going to be the more times that this brush tip shape is going to be applied. All right, so now I kind of have like my settings where I want. Now the part that doesn't look right is that his hair looks like it's standing straight up, right? So I don't want that. So what I have to do is I have to come in here and adjust it. Make my size much smaller. There we go. I have to come in and adjust it for where I'm going to be on this animal's back. Okay, and then once I have it where I want, I'm just going to start clicking and dragging. And then look at that. And then once I get to a certain point, like, you know, come down here, and maybe some of them I'll kind of push out a little bit further than others. Go over it a few times. Oops, too far, I didn't like that one. Okay, and if you look at where my cursor is, most of this brush is inside of the ape. I don't have my brush all the way out here because that wouldn't look right. I could go in with a smaller brush, but this just works for me. All right, at this point, I'm going to need to come in and adjust the angle of it a little bit more, and then I would just kind of keep coming in, and I would go the whole way around, and look at how much better that looks. That looks so much more realistic. I'd probably kind of fill in a few more pieces. All right, so if you had anything, you know, especially animals with longer hair, so dogs or cats, cows, you know, panda, any type of bear, pretty much. So you would need to kind of go in with an extra brush like this and really add some of that dimension and detail back into the hair, just to take it that step further. And honestly, this type of stuff really matters to employers because it shows that you pay attention to detail. It'd be very easy just to leave this ape the way I had it at the very beginning and say, oh, okay, it's done. But this is going to make it that one step better than it would have been. And this is what sometimes can make the difference between it looking right in a magazine ad, in a composite, whatever it is that you're doing, versus what I had before. All right, so start to think of other ways that you can use those brushes. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you, and this is something that we haven't covered before, is something called Blend If. And this can really give you some great results depending on how you use it. So what I have here is an image of a slab of wood, and then underneath of it I have a lavender field. Okay, beautiful photo, right? So I want to show you how you can make some really neat effects with Blend If. So the first thing that I'm going to do is double click on the wood layer. And we've looked at these layer styles before, right? Like we did this like the first day in digital imaging. But now what I want to look at is the Blend If slider, the Blend If slider. So we have two of them. We have this layer and we have underlying layer. So right now this layer is the piece of wood, and then the underlying layer is the lavender. So we also have the drop down menu that says gray, red, green, and blue. So I will tell you that you will never get the same results if you use multiple photos, and that's because all these different graphics and photos have different colors in them. So this is what, let me just kind of show this to you, and we'll talk about what some of these values mean. And you could come in here and you could adjust some of these sliders and you might not see any change, and sometimes you do. All right, so here's what, actually, I want to go in with the lighter one. Yeah, I'm going to go in here. There we go. Okay. So you can see that as I pull in this right here, it's changing how much of the wood that we see. But it kind of has like these harsh edges to it. Well, if you hold down Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC and click, you actually can separate those, and that kind of blurs the edges a little bit. Kind of makes it look a little bit better. So here's what we're looking at. Okay, so it's saying blend if the underlying layer has these values of gray. Okay, so how do we look at this? Well, so we see the numbers 102 and 148. So we're working from 0 to 255. 255 being pure white, 0 being pure black. So this value, and right now I have it at 102, it says value smaller than, so anything darker than 102, be fully opaque, so not see-through. We need to be able to see the entire thing. Anything that is 148 and brighter, be completely see-through. And we can see that here, right? Anywhere that lavender photo is really bright, okay, close to white, it should be see-through, and that's what we're seeing, right? The top part, like where the sun is up here, we can see that. Now, what about this part in between? This just means be partially transparent, right? So you can see pieces of it, but not all of it. Okay, so basically we're saying if the underlying photo is really white, then we don't want to see the wood. Wherever that lavender photo is white, then hide the piece of wood. Wherever the lavender photo is really dark, then show the piece of wood. That's what that is saying. All right, now you can get some really beautiful results from this. Like, look at how neat this just kind of looks by itself. Like it looks like someone was kind of doing some odd like wood carvings or wood etchings. All right, so that could look really neat depending on the look that you were going for. And the great thing about this is you can still go in and mask it later. All right, so I'm going to put that back. I started to do this one, but then I went the other way because I thought that showing you the white part would be a little bit easier to understand. All right, so you can kind of get that in, have that to look like that. This one is kind of saying anywhere where the wood is darkest, make it be see-through. All right, so we're seeing like the really dark parts kind of go away. And then this is opposite, anywhere that it's really light and there's not that many light parts in the wood, but like look down here. These are light areas of the wood. And then I'll kind of blend those together. So that could look really neat. And then you just kind of pull those together to look, to go back together if you needed them to. Could kind of do the same thing, looking, depending on like a certain color that's there. So like if the underlying layer is red, make it look a certain way. And then you can flip these around too. Like sometimes the order of these will matter in the way that it looks. Okay, so just wanted to show you that to you because it could be kind of neat. In this tree grass masking, I wanted to show you kind of like all of it put together. So you could do that same thing. So I've got this tree layer here, and this is just to show you this is just to show you values. So I have this gradient layer, and if I actually, let me back up because I think I did that fast. I have a new sky layer, I have this layer with the tree on it, and then I have a gradient layer. If I double click the gradient layer to bring up the layer style dialog box, I'm still looking at the blend if, and it's saying blend if any values of gray. So it's talking, when it says this layer, it means the layer that you have active. So this gradient is the same thing as this gradient here. All right, so anywhere to the left of this little triangle is going to be transparent. Anywhere to the right of it is going to be fully visible, right? And that's what we're seeing here, right? So like anything from this value of gray and darker, hide. go away. And that's what we're seeing here. And then if you hold down Option or Alt, you can kind of blend that a little bit. All right, so that's kind of what we're seeing here. Same thing on this side. Now, if we choose the layer below it, it's based off of the tree layer. Okay, so I'm going to hide this. The reason I point this out is because you can use this to help replace skies as well. Sometimes it works out really well, sometimes it does not. So I'm going to use this, and then ba-bam, look at that. All right, I'd probably blend this just a little bit. And then look at how good that came out. Right, that was almost like perfect. So with this, I'm not saying it's going to work every time, but it is something that you can try. You still might have to come in and add a layer mask to it and get that sand dune brush and kind of brush along the horizon line here. You might have to get a brush that looks like a leaf and kind of fix up the tree a little bit, but this is a really great start, and it hopefully would make some of your maskings and some of your composites and things like that that you're doing a lot easier. This isn't something that you have to use all the time. It's just definitely something that could be really helpful, and I wanted you to know about it. So as always, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.